my name is Clara, and I was 29 when everything fell apart, or more accurately, when I chose to stop pretending everything was still standing. People always expect dramatic endings to come with dramatic beginnings, but the truth is that betrayal often arrives wearing comfortable clothes. It shows up in the mundane moments, disguised as normalcy, carrying grocery bags and asking what you want for dinner. It kisses you goodnight and steals your future while you sleep. Ethan and I had been together for 5 years. 5 years of shared Netflix passwords, of learning each other's coffee orders by heart, of building what I thought was a life. We shared a narrow canal-side apartment in Amsterdam's Jordan district, where the morning light filtered through tall windows and painted geometric patterns on our hardwood floors. We had Leo, a temperamental tabby cat who preferred me but tolerated Ethan's existence with feline diplomacy. And buried somewhere in the depths of our shared Google Drive was a folder titled, Wedding Ideas, Black Heart Emoji, because Ethan thought regular pink hearts were too basic. I thought we were happy. He thought I was blind. The apartment was mine, really. I'd fallen in love with it first, standing in that empty living room 2 years ago while the estate agent rattled off details about original moldings and authentic Amsterdam character. Ethan had been skeptical, too small, too expensive, too far from his office. But I'd already imagined our life there, weekend mornings reading newspapers in bed, dinner parties with friends squeezed around our tiny dining table, Leo sprawled across the windowsill watching canal boats drift past. I'd put down most of the deposit from my savings, money I'd been carefully accumulating since my first job at the consulting firm. When Ethan lost his marketing position 8 months later, I'd quietly taken over a larger share of the rent without making it feel like charity. Love, I told myself, wasn't about keeping score, but someone else was. I found out about her on a Tuesday in March. Spring was trying to announce itself in Amsterdam, the kind of tentative, hopeful weather that makes you want to believe in new beginnings. I was working from our kitchen table, laptop surrounded by case files and cold coffee, when Ethan's phone buzzed against the counter where he'd left it while showering. Hannah. The name appeared in a cheerful little notification bubble, accompanied by a preview of her message, "Can't wait for tonight." Mwah. My fingers froze above my keyboard. Tonight? We had plans tonight. Dinner at that Italian place near the Vondel Park, the one where they knew our order and always brought Leo treats in a small paper bag. Ethan had suggested it himself just that morning, kissing the top of my head as I made coffee and saying something about wanting to reconnect and talk about our future. The shower was still running. His phone buzzed again. Wear the blue shirt I like. And again. Can't believe Clara doesn't suspect anything. Shushing face. That's the moment when the world reshapes itself around you, when the familiar becomes foreign, when the ground you've been walking on reveals itself to be nothing more than paper and wishes. I sat there listening to water cascade in our bathroom, staring at a stranger's words on my partner's phone, feeling something inside me crystallize into a substance I didn't recognize. Not anger, exactly. Not heartbreak, not yet. Something colder. And more precise, the rational part of my mind offered desperate alternatives. Maybe Hannah was a surprise party planner. Maybe this was all some elaborate misunderstanding. Maybe I was reading too much into innocent messages between colleagues, but hearts know things that minds refuse to accept. I didn't touch his phone. I didn't screenshot the messages or confront him when he emerged from the bathroom, hair damp and humming tunelessly. Instead, I watched him dress for our dinner, selecting a blue button-down shirt from his closet with what now seemed like calculated care. I watched him check his reflection, adjust his collar, practice a smile in the mirror. "Ready for our date?" he asked, kissing my cheek with lips that tasted like lies. "Almost," I said, and meant it in ways he couldn't imagine. That we went to dinner. We ordered our usual, margarita pizza for me, quattro stagioni for him, a bottle of Chianti to share. We talked about work, the weather, Leo's recent veterinary checkup. Ethan's phone remained face down on the table throughout the meal, but I could see him glancing at it with the desperate frequency of someone expecting important news. When it buzzed during dessert, his eyes lit up with anticipation before remembering where he was, with whom. "Work?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Probably," he said, not checking. "You know how it is." I did know. I knew he was probably supposed to meet Hannah after our dinner. I knew our reconnection and conversation was meant to assuage his guilt, not address our problems. I knew that while I was sitting there believing in our future, he was calculating how to manage his present deceptions, but I also knew something he didn't. I was done being managed that night. After Ethan fell asleep beside me with suspicious ease, no restless tossing, no guilt-induced insomnia, I lay awake making lists. Not angry lists or vindictive lists, but practical ones. Lease agreements. Bank accounts. Furniture ownership. The accumulated detritus of a shared life that needed to be untangled with surgical precision that I had contributed 80% of our apartment deposit. I had proof of this in my banking records, along with documentation of the larger rent payments I'd been making since Ethan's job loss. Our lease agreement listed both our names, but the law was clear. I could legally terminate my portion with appropriate notice. The furniture was mostly mine, pieces I'd accumulated over years of living independently before Ethan moved in. Even Leo was technically mine, his adoption papers and veterinary records bore only my signature. What I didn't have was drama. And surprisingly, I didn't want it. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a master of strategic invisibility. While Ethan was at work, or wherever he actually spent his increasingly frequent evening meetings, I began the quiet work of extraction. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and slowly, carefully transferred money in amounts small enough to avoid suspicion. I researched apartment rentals in other cities, places where my consulting firm had partnerships that would allow remote work. I updated my passport and driver's license. I even scheduled Leo's vaccinations for international travel, telling the veterinarian we were planning a possible relocation in the coming months. Lisbon called to me. I'd visited once for a work conference and fallen in love with its hills. Its light, its unhurried pace. The cost of living was lower than Amsterdam, the weather was better, and most importantly, it was far enough away to make impulsive visits from guilt-ridden ex-boyfriends prohibitively expensive. I found a small rooftop apartment in Alfama through an expatriate housing group, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, a terrace overlooking terracotta roofs and the Tagus River. The landlord, a retired Portuguese professor named Miguel, was charmed by my elementary Portuguese attempts during our video call and agreed to hold the place for a month while I arranged my affairs. Lisbon chooses her people, he said in accented English. I think she has chosen you. During those 2 weeks, Ethan and I maintained the fiction of normalcy with Oscar-worthy performances. We cooked together, watched Netflix series, made love. With the practiced choreography of long-term partners. He complimented my cooking, asked about my work projects, even suggested weekend trips we should take when things settled down at the office. I responded with appropriate enthusiasm, played my role as the trusting girlfriend with method actor dedication, but I was also gathering evidence. Not for any legal proceeding, I wasn't planning to sue anyone or seek revenge through public humiliation. I simply needed to know the full scope of what I was leaving behind. Ethan's laptop password was the same one he'd used for everything since college, our anniversary date, followed by his football team's abbreviation, romantic and secure in equal measure. His email revealed a 6-month correspondence with Hannah that progressed from professional collaboration to personal confession to explicit planning. Weekend getaways I'd thought were work conferences. Evening meetings that were actually dinner dates. Late nights at the office that were spent in her bed. The most crushing discovery wasn't the sexual content or even the emotional intimacy they'd developed. It was a message where Ethan described me as nice enough, but kind of naive, and complained that I was too comfortable with our relationship. Hannah had responded with sympathy, calling me one of those girls who never sees it coming, and joking about how I probably thought we were going to get married. They weren't wrong about the marriage part. I had thought that. I'd imagined proposal scenarios, researched venues, even bookmarked wedding dresses during slow work days. But naive? Comfortable? Too trusting, perhaps. But I was learning that by the end of the second week, my exit strategy was complete. I had transferred enough money to fund several months of independent living. My firm had approved a 6-month remote work arrangement with their Lisbon partner company. Leo's travel documentation was in order. I'd even arranged for a moving service to collect my belongings the day after my departure, timing it for when Ethan would be at his weekly football match. A routine so established it bordered on religious observance. The only thing left was the farewell. I considered various approaches. The confrontational scene where I dramatically revealed my knowledge of his affair. The silent treatment, simply disappearing without explanation and letting him piece together what had happened. The detailed letter explaining his failures and my disappointment. The public exposure, sending evidence of his cheating to mutual friends and letting social consequences unfold naturally, but none of these options felt like me. They felt like reactions, and I was done reacting to Ethan's choices. I wanted my departure to be an action, deliberate, clean, and entirely my own. So on my last morning in Amsterdam, I made him breakfast, scrambled eggs with chives from our windowsill herb garden. Coffee in his favorite mug, the one he'd bought during our weekend trip to Prague 2 years ago. Toast with the expensive jam he loved but never bought himself because he considered it an unnecessary luxury. I set the table with our good plates, the ones we usually saved for guests, and arranged everything with the kind of care you give to final performances. Ethan emerged from the bedroom already dressed for work, checking his phone with the distracted focus that had become his morning ritual. He looked surprised to find the elaborate breakfast waiting. "What's all this?" he asked, but his tone was pleased. Probably relieved. A nice breakfast from his girlfriend meant she suspected nothing, meant his careful deceptions were still holding. "Just felt like doing something special," I said, pouring his coffee. "We don't have breakfast together enough anymore." We ate and talked about mundane things. His presentation later that day. My client meeting that afternoon, fictional, but he didn't know that. Whether we should finally replace our ancient coffee maker. Leo wound around our legs under the table, purring with the satisfaction of a cat who sensed change in the air and approved. When Ethan finished eating, he kissed me goodbye with unusual tenderness, guilt, probably, or maybe genuine affection. For someone he was about to lose. He grabbed his keys from the counter, shouldered his laptop bag, and paused at the door. "Love you," he said, like he had hundreds of times before. "I know," I replied, like I never had before. After the door closed behind him, I sat in the silence of our apartment for exactly 5 minutes. Not grieving, not raging, just existing in the space between one life and another. Then I stood up, washed the breakfast dishes, and began my final preparations. I packed my clothes and personal items into 2 suitcases, everything else would follow later. I gathered Leo's travel carrier and his favorite toys. I watered all the plants one last time, especially the fiddle leaf fig I'd nursed from a struggling cutting into a corner-filling statement piece. It would probably die under Ethan's care. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I left his keys on the kitchen counter next to a sealed envelope. White paper, black ink, my handwriting at its most precise. "You lied." "I didn't." "You played games." "I played along." "But unlike you, I know. When the game ends, the rent is yours now. So are the lies. I've taken what's mine, including my peace. Please water the plants once in a while." Leo never liked you anyway. I considered adding more explanations, accusations, expressions of hurt or disappointment. But those were his emotions to manage now, not mine to articulate. I had said everything I needed to say in 27 words. Leo protested the travel carrier with dignity rather than panic, as if he understood the gravity of our departure. I took one last look around the apartment we'd shared, memorizing details I knew I'd want to remember differently later. The way morning light struck the kitchen table, the view of the canal from our bedroom window, the spot on the couch where we'd watched countless movies together. Then I picked up my cat, my suitcases, and my carefully reconstructed life, and walked out the door. The taxi to Schiphol Airport took 40 minutes through familiar streets that already looked like postcards from someone else's vacation. I didn't cry during the flight to Lisbon. I didn't feel victorious or vindicated or dramatically liberated. I felt quiet, purposeful, like someone who had made a decision and was seeing it through to its conclusion now. 3 months later, I write this from my small rooftop flat in Alfama, where the sun doesn't lie and neither do I. The apartment is tiny but entirely mine, whitewashed walls, blue-tiled floors, windows that frame the river like living paintings. Miguel was right, Lisbon did choose me. The city has a way of embracing expatriates fleeing complicated pasts, offering them light and wine and the radical possibility of starting over. I drink my coffee in silence now. The good kind. The kind that comes after choosing yourself. Why work with the Portuguese consulting firm is challenging and engaging. My Portuguese is improving weekly. Leo has claimed the sunny corner of the terrace as his domain and rules it. With the satisfaction of a cat who has traded up in both climate and real estate. I've made friends among the expatriate community, other people who left other lives for other reasons, all of us learning that courage sometimes looks like buying a one-way ticket and trusting that the rest will figure itself out. I don't know what happened after I left. I blocked Ethan's number before boarding my flight and haven't checked our mutual social media accounts. Friends have reached out with questions I haven't answered, sympathy I haven't solicited, updates I haven't requested. The story of our ending belongs to me now, not to the people who want to dissect its remains. Sometimes I wonder if he watered the plants. If he kept the apartment or found the rent too expensive without my contributions. If Hannah moved into help with expenses and discovered that other women's betrayals rarely feel as romantic in practice as they do in theory. But these wonderings pass like clouds, interesting to observe but not worth chasing. What I know is this: I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't try to hurt him the way he hurt me. I just left, and in the leaving, I found something. I didn't know I'd lost myself, whole and unborrowed, sitting in Portuguese sunshine with a cat who finally gets the attention he deserves and a life small enough to hold in my own two hands. The art of leaving quietly, I've learned, isn't about the noise you don't make. It's about the sound of your own footsteps, walking away.